It's alive! Alright, I've gone ahead and loosely mounted the motor to the frame. Nothing's done up particularly tight yet. That's going to give us a little bit of movement if we need to, you know, shift it to the side to try and clear the chain. Now, if we can get a good view under here, I can wiggle it further down the frame, and I intend to. If I'm not careful, it will impact the chain guard on the other side, but I've been able to line it up fairly low so that it's it clears it. But that's not a terrible height to have it at anyway, but I'd prefer just to tilt it a little bit to the back to try and make the line between the drive sprocket and the rear sprocket a little bit straighter. Right, the next thing for me to do is to take the grips off the handlebars, loosen everything off and move it down, and we're going to fit the clutch cable and the throttle assembly. Now, when removing your handlebar grips, if you don't care about it, just cut them off. You can do what I'm doing and just twist it and turn it and struggle it. These are fairly good quality rubber grips, so I'm opting just to sort of twist and grip and turn it inside out, because I may choose to reuse them. But there's a couple of tips. One is squirting, you know, soapy water detergent under there to give it a bit of lubrication, or WD-40 I guess would work. The other thing is compressed air. If you've got a compressed air jet that you can get under there, it'll pop right off. But the easiest thing to do is just to cut them off. So the first issue I have to address is the necessity for putting in the bar end mirror. It not normally would be a problem, except this is the side that of course the throttle goes on. So what I have to do is enlarge that hole on the end big enough to fit this through. Now, I do have fairly good quality rubber throttle grip on the Mk4 bike. I'm going to leave that be. I'm going to go get out my Dremel, because it's a nice, easy, simple tool to use. I'm going to go ahead and make that nice and neat and the perfect size, so there'll be no jagged edges and nothing for it to catch on, and that way I can slide the mirror through the end of the throttle. Alright, so with the Dremel I made that hole bigger.
My shoulder. Oh, you're recording.
I'm recording. It's alright, that's what editing's for.
Sure, what you doing?
Demonstrating.
How to put a mirror into a bike. Oh!
Dang right.
The handle.
Yep, it goes into the handle.
Bye, mirror.
Here, hold my frame for me.
Yeah.
I want this, just what I'm doing in the frame. Alright, so we tighten that up. Now these handlebars are weird because they point backwards, but I've got 3 ways to adjust the mirror, so I can go out, up and down, and like that. I could even have it hanging down if I wanted. But the most important part is that...
To make sure you can see.
No, to make sure I can still make the bike go with the throttle. Once it's finished going in, I can still turn it.
Oh, that's handy.
And that's why I had to cut the hole in the end.
Ah. Oh, flop.
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 Alright, thank you. The reason that I took that little stud out is because I like being able to move this up and down as I'm going. If I get it wrong, then I like being able to move it. So I haven't got the cable in there yet, that comes later, but this just lets me know where everything needs to sit. So these wires are going to have to come down through here, around there. I'll tie them all up so they're nice and neat and out the way, but they will connect to the next bit down there. Whop, whop, whop!
You're weird.
The reason why they have that stud in there is because what can happen is if you're too rough on the throttle, you get overexcited and you want to go faster, and you pull it too hard, you'll just twist it around like that. This is Do Everything Spray.
Is that what it's called?
No, that's what it is. It's called WD-40. It does everything.
It's called oil. So I can build things? Oh, wait, what are you using for?
This is for lubrication because it was getting stuck.
It's going to help it be loose.
You see how easy that was for me to get on?
Uh-huh. Now your pick. Is it going to fit though?
Well, the point is making it tight, Ella, because it was too loose, and adding that bit of rubber helps it to grip.
It's a good angle.
Yes.
It's all about the
Stop
angles.
Borrow a bit of the WD-40 from there.
Yeah?
I can't get on a green.
Oh, yeah, you need help. Why don't you play on the slide? I can't help you at the moment. I'm holding a camera.
We're making fun of you.
Why? Because it's fun.
So I'm just sizing this up to what is comfortable for my hand. Alright. What we're doing is the clutch cable. We need about that much. Just got to be careful that we don't pull it all the way through the sheath. So don't pull any more than you need out. Alright, so what we do is we slide it in there and then we just turn it to lock it. And then we'll wind that all the way in, because if this gets too loose then we can wind it out and it will pull the cable tight again.
Oh.
And so we just thread that up into there. Alright, and just like the other cables. Alright, go back around to the other side because you get a better view.
I'm just going to stand up.
Now I'm going to neaten all these cables up properly later, but there's two springs that we have to put on here. Right. Yep, two springs.
Are you using some cardboard to build your...
Yes. Big spring and little spring. Okay?
Yeah.
Big spring goes on first.
And we're putting
big spring goes all the way up, and it will just sit over the black piece there, because that'll sit against the engine and it will stop it from getting hot from the engine heat. Now, can you get in over here?
Whoa,
I want to see threading the cable through here. Alright, so you sort of just jam that spring on to that end there. That'll sit up about there. Now, little spring goes on the other side of this black bit here.
Do you want me to turn around so they can see?
No, just get a top-down view of that, of what I've done there. See that? Alright, now my screwdriver.
I need a toe.
Here you go. That's a 14mm spanner.
Why?
Because it's 14mm wide.
But it's too big.
Okay, try a 10mm spanner.
Can you pull them?
Yes, you can have both of them. But bring them back. Alright, so this little screw here is what will lock the clutch in. Which is just checking there.
Mom, when she's out, she's probably like, where is everyone?
Come on, there we go. Alright, so we've threaded that through. Now we need to pull it reasonably tight. So holding that bar down there. It doesn't need to be perfect at this point because the engine's not even tied down completely. Now when I pull the lever, this bar should move. So I hope you're going landscape, which is side to side. See that?
Whoa.
Now with that in, I should be able to spin the cog in there, which I can.
What's the cog?
That's what the chain will go around.
Okay.
Alright, and with that out, it doesn't move. When setting up the clutch cable, you've got to make sure that the clutch is still disengaged when you've got that locked in. You do have a bit of extra movement in the cable after that lock lets go. So when setting it up, you've got to make sure that when you lock it in, that's still moving freely. Otherwise it's not doing its job. So what we have here is our master link.
What the?
No, I meant link as in the chain, not as in your name.
Wow.
These parts of the chain are called links. And you're called Link, but you're not a chain. So to remove that, you just get a pair of pliers on one of the nubs like that, and the other end just on the edge. And easier to do with two hands, just like anything else. But it'll just pop off like that. Alright, and then you can just turn it, lift that plate off. Alright, and don't lose any of these pieces. So remember, you need the pegs, the plate, and the locking pin. Now, when you're readjusting the chain, always make sure that on the top of the chain, the round part of this master link pin is pointing into the motor. Because if you have it pointing this way at the top, there's a chance that this will, hit something or connect, and it'll just come flying off. Alright, so at this point I've just got the chain tucked up inside there. What I'm looking at is points of contact. Now we do contact the mudguard there. Now your options are either to remove it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the points where it does contact, and I'm going to grab my Dremel and just go ahead and cut it out. Ideally you'd remove the tyre first, but you know what, I'll be pretty careful. You do have a little bit of movement to the left and right with the motor, but behind that chain guard there's no risk of it contacting the frame. So we're going to run our chain up along the inside here. Just eyeballing that, I'm looking like I'll remove 1, 2 and 3 links. When we put the tensioner on, we do have to be careful. The closest point of contact is there. Right. But if we're good with our tensioner, then we'll be able to get it sitting up in there, which will clear the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and fetch the Dremel out, and we're going to cut a small chunk out of the mudguard there. Alright, so I've gone ahead and just scratched a little bit of the paint off. Now I've gone maybe 4 or 5 mil higher and lower to where the chain lined up to, because I just want to make sure that we'll actually just change that there, that if there is movement in the chain like this, it's still not going to hit that guard. I've gone and popped the clutch cover case off anyway, because despite having a free turning little wheel there, it is sometimes easier when you're sizing the chain just to get your spark plug tool there, stick it on that nut, and then just manually turn it over there, because chain alignment is everything. When you're lining up the chain, you really want to make sure that it's not slipping off there, because what was happening is I was trying to turn it just with my fingertips and pull the chain through. The chain was just sliding off the top there and getting jammed up. So if you're having trouble feeding the chain through like I was in the first place, just remember, spark plug tool fits perfectly, and then you can just wind over. When you do that, you do have to make sure that there's no spark plug in the top there, because otherwise it's near impossible to turn. And as you can see, I've cut my little hole out there. The chain clears the back of the mudguard now. Now I've pulled that tight over the cog, because when the engine's running, this top will be tight anyway. The tension on the bottom of the chain is from the tensioner itself. Now, depending on where I manage to get that in, which should be further back on the frame back here anyway, we should clear the bottom because there's plenty in there, plenty of space in there. And if there's not, I can just come back in and tidy that up, make it a bit bigger if I need to. But the important thing is to make sure you do have enough clearance, because the chain can slap around quite a bit, and you do want to make sure that you're not going to be hitting there, which if it's that loose on the top, well, you've got more problems than that anyway. So I'm going to take this chain off now, and I'm just going to grind off the sharp edges there. I will just put a lick of spray on there just to seal it up, but I wouldn't mind painting it to match anyway, so I'll have to go to pick up some olive green spray or something so I can just spray over the top of it. Alrighty, so I've just very roughly sprayed a bit of black over there just to protect the surface from, you know, rust and weather. Now I do intend eventually to touch that up with the olive green, but at least for now that's protected and I don't have to worry about rust setting in. So we've got our master link on, except for the clip. Now remember, you've got to have the clip pointing into the motor this way because the chain's going this way. That means if your master link is on the bottom, it's got to be facing the other way. And if that's confusing, follow it around the chain. Make sure that the direction it's going is always rounded edge first. Alright, so that's the tensioner style that came with the kit. And I thought, oh, you know, we'll give it a go, see how it is. There are only 2 points of contact. And I'm going to recommend, if you get one of these, chuck it away. Don't let it anywhere near your bike. I went and stole the tensioner off the Mk4 bike. I've had no problems with this style, easy to put on, and there are 4 points of contact, 4 bolts that need to come loosen before this will move. Also, it's got that angle on the tensioner, whereas this one, it's just straight up and down, so there's another reason I like it. Your other option is to get the spring tensioners that come off a replacement case there and hang off there or there. I've never used one of those, but I hear they are a good option, especially if you're having issues with a tensioner that's constantly sliding around. So when you are tightening down your tension, chain alignment is everything. You have got to make sure that it's coming cleanly off the bottom of the sprocket. Which means moving it around. That looks like it's not aligned, but it actually is. It's just the angle of the camera. But the main one is to make sure that you are clearing, try and get you a good close up there. Yep, there we go. Clearing the tyre. You want to be able to comfortably get a finger in there. And obviously any other points in the body that you need to sort out, like that. I'm confident because of the tensioner here, I'm not going to get the chain slapped there. If there is any extra movement in it, it'll be in the top there. But once I finish tightening this down, there's not going to be that much movement in the chain at all. Tensioner's on. We gave it a good kick and it didn't move. Now the engine mounts haven't been done up yet, because our next step really is putting the exhaust on and making sure it clears the pedals. But before I get ahead of myself, I'm going to go ahead and fit the chain guard cover. Dremel. So this is why I've left the engine tension bolts loose until now. Pedal clearance. This will be the bane of any motorised cyclist. We can tilt the engine to the left or the right. Obviously, if it's hitting, you can tilt a little bit there, but a small amount of clearance is still a clearance. If there's absolutely no other way, you've got to get it into a vise and bend it. But if you can make it work with what you've got, then you do that. So we're going to go ahead now and tighten up all of our engine mounting points. Now that the engine's bolted on, it's time to go ahead and throw on the carburetor. So go ahead and thread the accelerator cable down through the top there. Alright, so just make sure that your carburetor is snug up to the lip in the intake pipe there. And again, make sure it's stretched to be nice and straight up. If need be, you know, if this is contacting your top bar, you can cock it at a very slight angle, but too much of an angle and you will have issues with the fuel and the float bowl there. So go ahead and tighten that up, and then we're going to route the accelerator cable all the way up to the throttle assembly. I've gone ahead and put the accelerator cable, tied it up under there. We've tightened our throttle, kill switch is in a good position. Cable seems to be working fairly well. Next step is to fit our fuel tank, and then we'll run the cables down. So this kit didn't come with an exhaust hanger, so I had to go ahead and make one. And all I've done here is used a ring clamp and a piece of bendable bracket material. It's like $5 from the hardware store. And I've just brought it up under there and tucked it up under the U-bolt there. So hopefully that'll be enough to sort of stop it from really shaking off. And if I do notice a bit of extra movement in there, I can just tack up into the frame, which I don't want to do, but I have that option. Alright, the fuel tank is done, but I've done something excessively stupid and lazy, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I had trouble with the brackets. They just won't fit. So I've gone and cable tied the damn thing to the frame. I definitely do not consider this a permanent solution. That's part of my just make it work attitude. Sometimes you just got to do what you've got to do to keep the show on the road. So the next step for me is to go and steal the fuel filter off the Mk4 bike, because I threw the one that came in this kit away. If you've watched the unboxing video, you'll have known that. So we're going to stick the filter up fairly high. Now if you look closely, I've done away with cable ties there and just used a ring clamp. Obviously I've put that on sort of backwards, but you can get in there if you look at it from that angle. But the expectation is that you're not going to have to pull these hoses off at all, ever. And it was frustrating me every time I'd have to take the carby off. I was going through cable ties, because you know, you're pretty much one use and you're done. At least with these ring clamps I'll be able to reuse them. So I'll go ahead now and we'll get that sized up for the fuel filter. Alrighty, so our fuel line is now connected. So we've got 4 ring clamps. That's optional. I'll be honest, I've never had any issue with using the cable ties in the fuel line. I do recommend you get rid of the stuff that came in the kit and get yourself, you know, a good lot of spare, good quality fuel line. I've just loosely strung a cable tie here around the throttle cable. Make sure it's not actually pinching the line. That just pulls the line into the frame and stops it from sticking out, potentially getting caught on your leg or anything else that might be brushing up against the bike. Alright, so now that the fuel line is connected, we're getting very, very close to startup. What we have to do now is mount our CDI. Popular spot is somewhere up here. Connect all our wires, tidy all our wires and cables up, and then we should be ready for our first fire. Our CDI is on. That's one part that we don't have to feel guilty about cable tying. Now our wires and kill switch are connected to magneto, obviously down there, and kill switch up there. Now I do have a little bit of a problem with the short amount of wire I have going to the kill switch. Reason being is when the wheels turned all the way to the left, it does tend to pull them fairly tight. It's only going to be a minor problem, so I think I'm just going to run a cable tie there. But in the long term, if this sort of business, it does get to be a bit of a nuisance, I'll just buy some wire, extend it out, and then I can wrap it down. I can wrap it down the handlebars and follow the frame down here, which will be neater. But obviously this is not a finished project with things like this that still need addressing. All I have to do is tidy up those cables and wires, put the spark plug in, and we should be ready for firing it up. Alright, so I've made a few minor changes to the handlebar assembly. Obviously I've got my mirror there, but I've swapped the brake lever and the gear selector around. Now obviously originally this would butt up against the handle, so you could pretty much just grip it on the go. But with it like that, the lever was, you know, all the way out there, and it just wasn't a natural way to get to the front brakes. Considering this has a coaster back brake, you definitely do not want to skimp on your front brakes, because, well, I mean, it's just reassurance. And now that the motor should be running, the need for constantly changing gears is less, so it's a lot easier to sort of chop and go like that and still be able to reach the brakes now. So I think that's it. I'm just going to tension that throttle cable, and then we'll try and fire it up. So we are ready to try and fire this up for the first time. Alright, so clutch. I keep on calling the damn choke a clutch. Right. So choke all the way up. Fuel is on. It has been primed. Everything's connected. Let's see how we go. So, what do I need? Phillips head screwdriver and 5mm Allen. In my build video, I was saying how important it is to make sure you've got good quality hardware in this case, because more than any other part of the bike, this is probably the most consumable part, being the clutch pads. And I always like to make sure that it's not too tight to begin with, because I don't want them wearing away prematurely. it does sound like it's got good compression at least. So what we want to do is take this little locking nut out, or locking screw as it were. Now we're just going to wind that flower nut clockwise to tighten up the pads. Now you are better off just doing small adjustments. As I say, you don't want it wearing out prematurely. It's alive. It's alive! It's alive!